And that makes a lot of sense what you said about we're creating a signal through fasting. But if you're constantly getting a catabolic signal with fasting and then switching to a feeding and then going back down to it's not good for a body that wants to maintain homeostasis. Yet a pulsed signal that the body then responds to and adapts to that has like a couple days of just like balance and another pulse signal. Fantastic. This is the same principle behind high intensity exercise as well, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. It's the same thing like exercising. Well, look, if you want to summarize all this, we're creating a stress, whether high intensity exercise or fasting.
Yeah.
The body biologically went through these stresses for hundreds of thousands of years when we had no food all the time. We were walking all the time looking for food. So these stresses existed. And we developed a mechanism to cope with them. And that mechanism is protection. So it's good to stress from time to time, but it's not good to stress all the time. That's the key here.
Hey there, my friends. It's Dr. Anthony Balduzzi, and I want to welcome you back to another episode here on the Fit Father Project and the Fit Mother Project podcasts. I'm super excited about this conversation today because we have an expert on fasting, Dr. Joseph Antoun, who's going to be basically breaking down the latest research on fasting and also talking about the incredible program that he developed with some of the world's leading longevity researchers called ProLon, which is kind of like a fasting mimicking diet. It's like a 5-day program that gives you a lot of the benefits of fasting. And the reason I'm so jazzed up about this particular conversation is because we have a true expert in the house. And Dr. Joseph Antoun has a very impressive bio, and I want you to humor me as I read this whole thing, just so you really know who you're about to hear from. This guy walks the walk. So here's Dr. Joseph's bio. Dr. Joseph Antoun's passion is to enhance human longevity. He's the CEO and chairman of the Board of L-Nutra, a Nutritech company leading the food as medicine movement and developing breakthrough Nutritechnologies like his fasting mimicking diet called ProLon, with the goal of profoundly impacting how humans age and bringing back fasting as a longevity lifestyle to humanity. Before becoming the CEO of L-Nutra, Dr. Antoun was the CEO of Health Systems Reform, a boutique consultancy aimed at elevating public health through reforming health systems and improving healthcare delivery. He was also the co-director of the Center of Health Policy at the University of Chicago, an adjunct professor of health policy at the Buck Institute for Research on Aging, and a fellow at the Department of Social Policy at the London School of Economics and Political Science. Dr. Antoun completed his health policy studies at Harvard University, public health studies at Johns Hopkins University, medicine and biological sciences at St. Joseph's University, and his PhD studies in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern studies at King's College. He is married to his wife, Corrine, and has 3 amazing boys, and stays healthy by practicing fasting with food and walking daily while taking business calls on his phone. So this is a very impressive man. I think he was in school for over 3 decades, and he's learned so much about fasting. And we really have a great conversation where he's sharing a lot of his insights. I'm interjecting some of the things that I figured out from helping so many people with their health. And I think you're going to get a lot of value from this. We talk about intermittent fasting and what that actually means. We talk about daily time restricted eating. We also talk about some of the metabolic changes that happen when you do longer fasts, 3-day, 5-day, and Dr. Antoun also shares his personal philosophy on how to really like maximize these longer fasts and do them in a way that they're not like totally hard and impossible to pull off. So I know you're going to love this conversation because here's the deal. Our human bodies were built to fast. So you need to know this information if you want to maximize your longevity and your health. And this is the simple stuff that anyone can do. So let's tune into today's conversation. And if you're getting inspired by this as we go through this and you're interested in checking out some of the things that Dr. Antoun references, we're going to have links in the show notes as well, where you can actually try the ProLon fast, his whole 5-day system. There's going to be links there, as well as links to the book by the longevity researcher that helped develop this, Dr. Valter Longo. There's going to be links in the description for all that stuff. So make sure you check that out. And let's hop into today's conversation with Dr. Joseph Antoun. All right, Dr. Joseph Antoun, welcome to the Fit Father and Fit Mother Project podcast. It's truly an honor. You're such an accomplished man, and you're doing very important work, which is bringing the science and the practical nature of nutrition for longevity and fasting to the masses. And I'm such a huge fan of this. And if people are listening inside our Fit Father and Fit Mother programs, they have some familiarity with fasting. And what I want to do today is leverage your expertise and your experience to talk about the landscape of why nutrition nutrition is so important for longevity, and effectively, what kind of tools do we have in terms of basic fasting and some of the protocols that you've developed through your research and all the different users that are using your prolonged fasting program to really improve their health. So thanks for being here, and let's kick into it. Let's talk a little bit about like the connection between longevity, nutrition, and fasting. Let's start there.
Yeah, that's well. Thanks for having me, and I can assure you at the end of this podcast will change a lot of people's lives. So I'll get straight into it. That's my passion. Talk about the commonality or the importance of the crossing on nutrition, fasting, and longevity. I started my career as a physician, and I was trained to do pills, right? And this is what took me all the way till today. Is exactly realizing the importance of nutrition and now fasting for longevity. So in two sense, food is the only product we consume every day since the day we're born to the day we die. So it's the most powerful signal the body can get.
Yeah.
And we've always thought about food in numbers of calories and macros and micros. We never thought about timing of food up until the last 20 years. The science of fasting starting to come out, whether it's Valter Longo at USC, who's probably the leading scientist on fasting, whether it's Sachin Panda talking about the timing of the day, and Mark Mattson and all the other leaders in the field of research of fasting. So to tackle directly the common ground is that we as humans were not built to eat every few hours, right? We're creatures like others, like other animals or even plants, where we should follow day and time, and we are circadian creatures. Snacking late at night was not part of our diet. Calling an Uber Eats and getting food in 40 minutes at 11 p.m. was not part of our diets.
Yeah.
Although we sleep at night, our digestive system needs to sleep. Every organ in our body basically is a circadian organ. And so the Nobel Prize in medicine in 2017 was on a biological clock of the body. And it's so important because it dictates how well we sleep. And that's a longevity parameter. It dictates how well or our metabolism and therefore nutrition and longevity. It dictates how the metabolic rate and exercise and energy the next day. That's another pillar of longevity. So thinking about food as quantity and as timing is probably the biggest two discoveries that have happened the last, if you want, 2 decades. Now, fasting comes in as part of fasting. The intermittent fasting is the timing of the food. And there's a prolonged fasting, which has driven that entire wave of fasting adoption, is showing that if you go longer on a fast, you're creating a bigger stress, and therefore the cells get engaged and through autophagy. So let's talk a little bit about that in detail. So probably most of the listeners are familiar with intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Which basically, medically wise or scientific wise, we say anything below 2 days is intermittent fasting. Most people equate intermittent fasting to 16-8 because the most practiced way of doing intermittent fasting is skipping breakfast. And when you skip breakfast, you have, 10 hours of sleep, 8-10 hours, then you skip breakfast all the way to lunch, you add 4 hours. So that's your 16 hours of no food. And a lot of people have jumped on that wave because 73% of Americans are overweight. So losing a little bit of weight, skipping breakfast, losing a little bit of weight, if you don't binge eat after, is a good point. It's relatively, not that difficult to adopt. Maybe 16 hours could be a little bit too much for many, but 12 to 14 is probably, the circadian fasting is 12 hours.
Right.
Probably that's the most correlated, if you want, historically with and epidemiologically with longevity. So we study centenarians. We look at people who live 100 and beyond. And what I can tell your listener today, that we're almost for sure that if you do 12 to 14 hours, that's a pro-longevity fasting.
Yeah. Which means having an earlier dinner effectively. Maybe people have dinner around 5 or so, and maybe you do have breakfast, but it's coming in around 8. Even that amount of window is still a good number of hours. It's giving your body some kind of signal. And that's why I was just saying the signal can get deeper the longer you go.
You're 100% right. It's eating between that 5 to 7 window. And surprisingly, if you follow the centenarians who live 100 beyond, or if you read the trials of longevity and nutrition, breakfast is part of the centenarians, diet. So,
Yes.
so I think ideally you want to do 12 to 14 hours. So eat early and still have breakfast. Now, if you cannot do that for social reasons, because we became more socially connected as people and want to eat sometimes later, we watch Netflix, we watch YouTube, we spend it. So if you cannot and you're eating dinner a little bit later, yes, you can delay a little bit the morning. But I 100% agree with you. What the science and epidemiology and the centenarian studies are showing, centenarians are people who live 100 and beyond, is that 12 to 14 hours, which goes back to circadian eating. During the day you eat, when the sun is down, you try not to eat. You want your body organs not to be working. They need to sleep. They need to rejuvenate. And then the next day, you're going to wake up hungrier. The 16-8 is easy to adopt because we snack very late at night. And therefore, in the morning, it's easy not to eat. Yeah. And a lot of us have the reflux and are sleeping, and that helps. Right. So you wake up in the morning, you just don't even have an appetite.
Right.
You hear most people say, I don't have an appetite in the morning. Well, you ate very late and you had a little bit of reflux and you didn't sleep. Even the quality is not that good because of all the digestion happening. So to go back to the segmentation, intermittent fasting is below 2 days, is less than 2 days. The 12 to 14 hours we call circadian fasting. It's definitely a longevity, intervention. Some doctors, some key opinion leaders say do 16-8. 16-8 is if you want to lose weight, yes, go longer. You lose more weight, and unless you binge eat after, let's clarify that. Some people actually practice what we call 5-2, meaning twice a week. They do 5-2, meaning 5 days out of the week you eat normal. Twice a week you eat 600 calories or less if you're a man.
Which is one meal, right? You're having one hearty meal. It could be spread out into multiple, but it also could be some protein, some vegetables, and maybe a serving of carbohydrates will be around 500-600 calories. Yeah.
And it's below 600 for male, below 500 for female. It's called 5-2 if you do it twice a week. If you concentrate in one meal, it's called OMAD, 1 meal a day diet, another intermittent fasting type. And the most extreme way of doing intermittent fasting is the what we call the alternate day fasting. It's every other day. And honestly, the science is not showing that this is healthy. It creates a yo-yo effect. One day your body is happy to have the carbs and the protein and the storing and it's going anabolic. The second day it has to go back to catabolic. The third day it has to go back up. So it creates what we call a yo-yo effect.
Right.
And a lot of the fasting experts, they don't recommend doing. Now, it shows a lot of benefits
for weight loss
on the short term because it's intensive. It's intensive. But from a longevity perspective, so short-term perspective, you see the results. Long-term perspective, we don't know if that yo-yo effect is a healthy effect. But definitely, it's an intensive way to do fasting. Therefore, in the short term, you lose weight a little bit more aggressive.
I want to chime in here for a second because a lot of our members, when they get to the second phase of our program, kind of start doing something like a 5-2, where they may be doing 24-hour fast twice a week, spread out by a couple days. And that makes a lot of sense what you said about we're creating a signal through fasting. But if you're constantly getting a catabolic signal with fasting and then switching to a feeding and then going back down to it's not good for a body that wants to maintain homeostasis. Yet a pulsed signal that the body then responds to and adapts to that has like a couple days of just like balance and another pulse signal. Fantastic. This is the same principle behind high intensity exercise as well, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I was about to say. It's the same thing like exercising. Well, look, if you want to summarize all this, we're creating a stress, whether high intensity exercise or fasting.
Yeah.
The body biologically went through these stresses for hundreds of thousands of years when we had no food all the time. We were walking all the time looking for food. So these stresses existed and we developed a mechanism to cope with them. And that mechanism is protection. So it's good to stress from time to time, but it's not good to stress all the time. That's the key here. And this is why, it's either a lower stress, 12 to 14 hours, max 16. These you can do them every day. Or if you want to do twice a week, a little bit further stress, that's the 5-2. That's the 5-9.
I want to bring something up that you mentioned is like, let's talk about resting the digestive organs and kind of talking about centenarians. I think when I look at what's going on today is based on the fact that people are eating incredibly frequently with a lot of processed high calorie foods. We're constantly simulating spiking blood sugars, stimulating insulin, and that's driving a lot of these anabolic pathways. And this is why we have a lot of these like build up kind of conditions. We have a lot of cancers as well that are breeding in these high nutrient, insulin resistant kind of conditions. Yet we know this like yin yang principle has a lot of merit, where we want to balance the anabolism with the catabolism. So fasting's catabolic. Let's talk about digestive stress too, because I think a lot of people, when they start to fast, they feel better largely because they're not slamming the GI tract with food in a regular bit. What is it, with gut health being such a focus, what is your opinion or some of the research on maybe some of the gut health benefits of fasting, if there are some?
There are some identified, and there's a lot of research still looking into it. And we are looking at the microbiome changes that happen with fasting, right? So if you have, say you have a diet rich in fat and meat, let's just consider. So you would have a flora that's developed, microbiome that's developed to digest those.
Yes.
Now, when you fast, you're basically starving that flora, but we don't know which other flora takes over. So we're actually actively today researching this and to see what happens. But what you would assume, at least, that when you fast, you're not bringing, especially when you fast on a healthier diet. We'll talk about that. At least the leaky gut, the toxins, the micro trauma that you're doing to your gut and to your intestine is will decrease. And leaky gut is a huge part of now what we're discovering. It's part of diabetes, it's part of Alzheimer's, it's part of autoimmune diseases. And to explain this to your followers is there are a lot of molecules that we're not supposed to absorb. But when the gut is leaking because of the micro trauma, you're getting new molecules into the blood. And a lot of those are cross-matching with some of our organs, and the immune system starts attacking our organs, and you create an increase in inflammation across the body, and that's a pro-aging, and that triggers some of the diseases.
Yeah, very true.
And I mentioned as well. I want to go back a little bit to the connectivity between fasting and longevity, because we were talking a little bit about intermittent fasting, and I want to tie the knot with the prolonged fast and then the longevity, because it's critical. At the end of the day, we all want to live healthy long. That's the ultimate goal. And so we said less than 2 days, you're doing intermittent fasting. And then if you go longer than 2 days, you're doing what we call prolonged fasting or periodic fasting. There's a great paper published in Nature. Nature is probably the #1 science journal in the world by Valter Longo, I think was published just 3-4 months ago, explaining the differences between intermittent fasting and prolonged fasting, if folks want to go and read it. But basically, why we set up this 2 days timeline, if you go beyond 2 days, there's a crisis, meaning all of us, we have reserves in the body. Fat, I call fat your savings account. Mm-hmm. And then you have glycogen. That's the first thing you can tap into. That's your checking account in the bank. And then the liver can give you credit. The liver can do neoglucogenesis and dump a little bit of calories as well in the blood. So that's your credit that you can borrow from the bank. So you have 3 ways. You have fat reserves, glycogen reserves, and the fat also can do some neoglucogenesis. They can help you, but once you cross the couple of days of fasting, most people their body starts telling the cell, hey, you got to go and look inside of the cell for sources of energy. Mm-hmm. If you have debris, organelles, consume those, fix yourself, rejuvenate yourself, because we're going to go bankrupt. We're going to have to align and be at optimal performance to survive.
Yeah, it's like a corporation effectively like cutting and trimming down and the streamlining during a high pressure stress time. And this is like what people are calling autophagy, autolysis, this internal cellular cleanup. And again, I just want to highlight the point is this 2-day window is when we've really tapped into and used a lot of these stored carbohydrates. And the muscles, yes, those are gone. The liver is gone. All the liver glycogen is gone as well. We're tapping into fat reserves at like low intensity, just at rest. And our body's starting to produce some ketone bodies. We probably were all along the way, but more of those are being produced along the way. And we're using some amino acids to create more glucose, exactly, for basics. And so now, exactly, it starts to get really interesting. You're talking about this process of the cleanup. What else starts to happen as we get deeper into this fast?
Yeah, and I fully agree with the example on the corporation. Again, if you're running a company and you need $1 million a month, if somebody comes and because that establishes the difference between fasting and all other diets. People ask me, is fasting a fad? Is fasting like other diets to lose weight? It's actually very much different, because there's two things that no diet does. A sharp decrease in the calorie. So if you're a company and you need $1 million, that's food, that's the calorie that you need every month. Every other diet, say, will give you 950 or will give you 900,000. Your bank account drops bit by bit, right? But actually, the metabolic rate slows down as well. Nobody talks about that. And when the metabolic rate slows down, you pick back fat very fast. And a lot of time, you're losing muscle in the short term, and you go back and you replace it with fat. This is what most diets do. We see a loss in fat, but we see a loss in muscle.
And lean muscle tissue, yes. And then one thing for people listening too is like when you're on any calorie-restricted diet, if that's what you're doing, strength and resistance training, again, is that signal. You use it or you lose it, right? So this is telling that body to hold on to that. So that's an important aspect of any health program with a low-calorie diet. So please continue.
Now, fasting is completely different. Fasting gives you a big stress. It works by stress, basically. So if I need $1 million to operate as a CEO of a company and you give me zero, now, of course, my bank account is dropping super fast now by $1 million. So we lose fat very fast. So it's even from a weight loss perspective, it's one of the fastest way to lose weight. But because it's the stress, the stress hormones are a little bit higher. The muscle tone is protected. So what fasting does, which most other diets don't do, is protection of the lean body mass. And we see that in a lot of fasting trials, and that's critical. And, it has to make sense evolution-wise and epidemiological-wise. So imagine, you're in the wild 10,000 years ago or 15,000 years ago, and there's not a lot of food. So the body learned to do two things. I'll break down your fat and I'll transform them into ketones so that I keep you up, because if the brain faints, we're exterminated as a race. And I need you to keep walking to find the next fruit or vegetable. So I invest in protecting the muscle. And we see that with fasting, which is very important for us, because at the end of a fasting cycle, you preserve the lean body mass, you cut a lot of fat, you keep your metabolic rate, so you don't go back and swap fat when you eat again. You swap muscle with fat. That's critical.
That's powerful. And I think one other thing I like to add into that example you gave is something that really blew my mind many years ago when I started studying and learning about fasting was like the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. The fact that you're getting a signal to grow new neurons and to improve the central nervous system. So I always hypothesize it's like, hey, your body's walking, you got the ketone bodies, and it's also giving you a little more maybe clarity or mental sharpness. It's like, hey man, find some food. And so it seems like that's a cool benefit as well. There's stuff happening for cognition, which in today's day and age is so important with longevity, right? With all the dementia that's happening, et cetera.
Exactly. So that's a great title, longevity. So what you're doing with fasting, you're losing the weight, you're rejuvenating your cells, especially if you cross to the autophagy part. And this is a great contributor to longevity because you're an optimized you, and biologically you could be a little bit younger, a step back younger. And this is what ties fasting with longevity. And it's important to understand that our biological age, I might be, say, 43, 44. If my biological age, if I was unhealthy growing up, I didn't have a great lifestyle, maybe my cells are 50-year-old, 55-year-old. If my cells are 55 years old, I'm going to get cancer or diabetes or Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease sooner than somebody else. So when you do fasting, what we believe is that due to this rejuvenation, due to the optimization, the stress, going back to the company example, you stress the CEO is going to go and fix the company, right? He's going to restructure, function, and structure. that is a better performing company. That's a company immune from the next shock.
Mm-hmm.
So what we believe is fasting first is a great metabolic intervention, cellular intervention, and therefore a healthy aging intervention. And that's the key to a healthy long life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just so accessible. I mean, I think let's talk a little more about maybe some of the stem cell stuff, like Valter Longo's, research on when you go deeper into these fasts, that you even get like the proliferation of new stem cells, and like there's like deep rejuvenation even in the marrow and stuff like that. I think that's fascinating for a lot of people too.
So talking about, you mentioned the name Valter Longo, and he's grandfather of a lot of the science of fasting, and he published a book called The Longevity Diet. I don't know if you can see it. I have a copy behind me right here in the corner.
We'll link it in the show notes too.
Yeah. The Longevity Diet 2018, I think, was Amazon's bestseller. And Valter got nominated among the top 50 most influential people in health for that.
Nice.
And he studies fasting in a very scientific way. And what he's seeing in mice and now he's studying in humans is that when you fast, he sees the organs shrinking. And this is not dehydration. He would hydrate normal. And even, he was part of the Biosphere 2. He was a PhD at that time with Roy Walford that did the Biosphere 2. So what he sees with this calorie restriction, he sees organs shrinking. And again, it wasn't dehydration. They were hydrated naturally. And in his labs in mice, he sees the same. And then when refed, he sees the organ going back to normal size. And this is what got all these theories in his mind of intracellular rejuvenation and also new structure being rebuilt or new stem cells. And he shows that in mice, spikes of stem cell circulation. In humans, there are early signs of that. The trials are still going, and to see how much the body does intracellular rejuvenation versus a potential extracellular ones. But I think autophagy, again, 2016 Nobel Prize, 2017 was on circadian rhythm. So both are related.
Yes.
They're big cornerstones of potential healthy long life.
Nice. Okay. I want to get a little bit bigger picture here. Fasting is obviously a very powerful part of longevity, but I'd like to get your take on maybe what's the holistic plan for living a long and healthy life. Like, what are the core pillars and tenets, fasting being one of those? How do you approach it? How do you personally approach living a long life and living as long as you possibly can with great health?
No, and I am a father, and the balance is so important between fatherhood and work and the 5 pillars of longevity. So we believe, and again, it's detailed in the book, but we believe there are 5 critical pillars for longevity. Nutrition, probably the most important one. And again, it's the only thing we consume every day of our lives since the day we're born to the day we die. So it must carry the biggest signal to the body to be healthy or to be poisoned or not be healthy. Number 2, probably it's actually social capital and being happy in that connectivity between humans, the love that you have at home, the social network, the social support, your wife, your kids, your parents. It's so important. That degree of happiness. If you study centenarians, people living 100 beyond, some of them, they smoke, some of them, they drink, they've ate animal fat for a long period. They walk a lot, they exercise a lot, but they're happy. The common factor is they love their family, they're happy people, they're positive, happy people. So I think this is something we're losing in life today, where we're living more, which we swapped happiness and social capital with moments of stress and joy.
Yes.
So, we experience a good dinner. Okay, then we go back, we think about the stress of work next day, right? So that's very important. And then comes exercise, and then stress, and then sleep. So these are the 5 pillars: nutrition, social capital, exercise, stress, and sleep. And I try to work on all of them. And it's not an easy balance like all of us. I always say the more we think we're discovering new technology, we think it's going to make our life easier. It's making just our life even more complicated.
Right.
Taxation and email and WhatsApp and Facebook, these were made to help us. And then they start demanding from us attention and pressure and feedback and all of that. So I always try to, if you want to learn what I personally do, I try to eat my dinner earlier. I try to do the 12 to 14. That's critical for me.
Yep.
We didn't talk about fasting with food. We talked about fasting with water. But
let's get to that at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually do my fast bar in the morning, which is a bar that gives you the benefits of fasting. I do 5 days of fasting with food, though. The only fasting on water I do is actually 12 to 14 hours. All the other fasts I do them with food, with our fasting mimicking diet. So I do every quarter our ProLon fasting mimicking diet. I do on a social capital, have a great family and great love, and that's so critical, I think, for our happiness.
Yeah.
I do sleep my. Actually, I'm weak on that point. I do my 5-6 hours only being a CEO, but I should get to that 7-8 hours.
Yeah.
Exercise, also being very busy. I'm not doing as much exercise as I used to do, but I do. I try to do my 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
My exercise key is this. Every call, I have my
nice.
I have my earphones and I walk. So
Yeah.
I try to take my calls outside of the office. I walk around the building, around the streets, and I get my 10,000 steps just doing calls and balancing that with being in the office.
Powerful.
So that's me personally. The way I try to do it.
Nice. I want to chime in on a couple things. The pillar, I think it was pillar 2 and pillar 4. Pillar 2 being what you called social capital and connections, and pillar 4 being stress. Yes. I've had this idea for a long time that the people that live the longest are those that keep the nervous system primarily in a parasympathetic state, right? Because anytime we're gearing this system up into that fight or flight or the sympathetic tone, we're demanding so much more from the body. The production of all of these adrenaline and catecholamines that are gearing us up, which is a taxation on the body. And I imagine, I would even say as important as good nutrition is how can you keep your body at ease as much as possible when you're not exercising. And I think that also comes down to proper breathing, proper sitting and posture, maybe time outside with the sunshine, like all these little factors that enable the human system to stay at ease.
Meditation or prayers, if we're believers. I mean, there's studies on a lot of studies coming up on those. So I fully agree with you. And by the way, that's the trigger of everything else. If you're de-stressing and happy, you'll eat less, you'll sleep better. You have energy to exercise. It's actually this is why I put it as almost equal to nutrition as the number 2 most important factor ahead of exercise, because it's a common trunk to have high energy and wanting to walk. It's a high common trunk that, I'm not going to binge eat at 11 p.m. If you're feeling happy and you're good. And so I fully agree with you on this point.
Yeah. And then you also made a really great point that you personally in your routine, every 3 months or every quarter are doing a longer fast using your fasting mimicking diet and your ProLon protocol. I think this is a nice transition because I personally do a 3-day plus water fast every quarter, but oftentimes like those are very intense and they're certainly not for everyone. But you've done a ton of research and you have a protocol that makes these more prolonged fasting easier, and you're able to have some food and nutrition throughout the process and still reap these deep benefits of a longer fast. So please tell us more about ProLon, the stuff that you guys do there, and what it entails and what it looks like when you go ahead and do this every quarter.
No, and thank you for this opportunity. So we started 20 years ago understanding the value of fasting and the benefits of fasting. And a lot of that research was taking place at University of Southern California, again, under Professor Valter Longo. But when he discovered that if you go longer on a fast, you're engaging the cells and you're doing that biological rejuvenation, which is critical. It's one of the miracles of biology to be able to self-correct. We lost it. We eat all the time now. We lost that. If you watch car racing, there's a pit stop. You change the wheels, you change the oil, and then you go back and you can last longer. Mm-hmm. That check-in and rejuvenation, we lost it because we eat all the time. Now, the problem is if you do a longer fast, it comes at a cost. Remember, the first cost is compliance. How many people can do, 3 days or 4 days of water fast? Number 2, you are compromising essential organs as well. So I'll go back to the corporate example. So if I need $1 million to operate per month, if you come and give me 0, I mean, yes, I'll let go some of the employees that are not doing the best, but top employees will leave because I cannot pay them.
Yeah,
I cannot put an order for my supplies to sell next month. That's going to compromise my revenues next month. So there's as many good decisions, as many bad decisions that somebody under such a big stress has to make.
Mm-hmm.
So, but fasting had a great longevity benefits in when we were studying mice. And then Dr. Longo and USC talked to the National Institute of Health, and they said, would you give us grants and money to go and develop a fasting mimicking diet? Meaning, instead of you need $1 million, we give you zero. Can I come and give you $400,000? Mm-hmm. That can go and help you pay the employees, order your supply, maintain operation, and it will keep the stress. 600,000 is a big difference, is a big stress. You'll still need to fix your company, and therefore you will thrive the next month. And that has been the goal of creating the fasting mimicking diet. Mm-hmm. We started studying both at the blood level. When you eat carbs, you have insulin. Insulin tells the body that, hey,
nutrients are here. Yep.
And nutrients are here. So how much complex carb and what part of the day I can give you so that you don't see that spike in glucose, mm-hmm. and therefore you don't see the spike in insulin. Therefore, the body is not knowing that you're eating.
Right.
Same thing with protein. What levels of proteins, plant-based proteins, what sequences of amino acids, that if I nourish you with those proteins, I don't spike your IGF. IGF mm-hmm. is another hormone of recognition of food based on protein. And then we start looking at the cells. If I feed you this kind of macronutrients, would they go under the nutrient sensing pathway, under the radar of detection of the cell? Mm-hmm. So after 20 years of research, we figured out a nutritional formulation called the fasting mimicking nutrition or the fasting mimicking diet. In the market, it's called ProLon, and this is one of the ProLon boxes behind me.
It comes in a box, and it has everything you need to basically go through this 5-day protocol.
Exactly. You get this box of food, and it has day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. You just take your day 1, and it has all the food you need. It's in the form of bars. It's not fasting by deprivation. It's actually food. It's the day 1 is 1,100 calories, mm-hmm. and day 2, 3, 4, and 5 are actually up to 780 calories, close to 800. So we're transforming a fasting by starvation, which has the benefits of fasting, but the deprivation side effects. We're transforming that to fasting by nourishment, whereby I keep the stress of fasting. So you keep losing the weight, you keep rejuvenating the cells. At the same time, I'm giving you some nutrients so that your essential organs don't feel as deprived. And obviously, it increases compliance big time as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, because you get the box and you can follow it, and fantastic. And I want to kind of summarize what I'm taking away from this is, number 1, everyone should have a structured meal timing that is ideally some 12 to 14 hours of time restricted eating, meaning you have some structure to that. Number 2, there is benefits to doing these 24-hour fasts once in a while, and you don't necessarily need nutrients for those. But when you go to a longer fast, there's like this 5-day, there's so much benefit to not necessarily cutting the payroll to zero, coming in at around $400,000 in our analogy, and giving your body some nutrition along the way. Tailored nutrition, I'm sure you guys are doing slow digesting carbohydrates, plant-based proteins, as you said, that are not have the branched chain amino acids that are spiking the insulin.
Healthy fats for the brain.
Healthy fats. There you go. Like maybe anti-inflammatory compounds in there. Like, yeah, sounds fantastic. And hey, like all things with health and fitness, information is wonderful, but it's all about action and compliance. So I love that you guys have something that someone can just take and follow. Right.
And science. I mean, if you talk to me as a consumer, there's hundreds of nutrition companies out there. I cannot name one. And I ask this question to everyone. Name one food company you trust based on their science and you always eat from. We try to be that company. We try to be the first nutrition technology company for the world. So just to tell people, this ProLon has gone through over 14 clinical trials, randomized clinical trials.
That's amazing.
Universities. So you're talking about USC, Stanford, University of Milan, University of Genoa, University of Miami, University of Indiana. So we have 18 universities doing trials, and so we really are happy with the science that allowed us to say what we can say today and what we're saying today, and it works. I mean, it's only 5 days. The beauty also is that it's only 5 days.
Yeah.
And I recommend folks to try it if they want to try it, and you'll see benefits on days. So it's an experience. It's a transformational experience. Fasting is so powerful on the body that they will feel the right away results.
and you will lose weight. I've had family members use ProLon, and it's not uncommon to lose 5, 7, maybe even some people lose 10 pounds during that period of time for many reasons, right? You're losing some water weight because your carbohydrate stores are depleted, but you're absolutely tapping into fat stores too. And I think an appreciated area of fasting benefit is you're also cleaning out your digestive tract. Like you're not putting as much food in, so you're moving stuff through. And actually, I don't know if this is like a little bit of a curveball question for you, if it's in the area of research, but I do have another health theory or an idea is that the healthiest humans that live a long time have cleaner digestive tubes, or at least have very, very regular bowel movements where stuff is moving through. We do know when you eat certain types of diets, and it's different for a different kind of people, that when stuff gets stopped up, particularly in the colon, you get the fermentation and secondary bile acids and salts that are kind of irritating the colonic epithelium. And for some people can raise the risk of colon cancer. We're meant to move stuff through this tube, not just allow it to sit. And I think fasting is so cool because it's another chance to get things to just kind of like, you're still drinking a ton of fluids, right? And you're still going to be pooping because you're eating food through ProLon. So I think that's a cool thing. More people should pay attention to cleaning out their colon a couple times a year.
A lot of the top 3 reasons when people do ProLon, they tell us they do it either for healthy longevity and healthy aging, weight loss, like you mentioned, especially fat. But actually, the number 3 is exactly what you're saying, is detox. Mm-hmm. And that detox with fasting is not just an extracellular detox. There's a lot of detox programs that you do for extracellular, but because of the rejuvenation, now you're doing a deeper detox, a more scientific and deeper detox. So and number 4 is changing relationship with food. Yeah. We're so addictive to some of the manners, and that 5 days it's short enough we have 93% completion rate, but it's long enough for somebody on day 6, you say, you know what? I just spent 5 days eating very, reasonable portion sizes. I didn't snack at night because it comes structured. It's easy to do, and they just feel that I'm not as much addicted to everything that I was doing before.
Yeah, and you completed something. You completed something that had a little bit of intensity where you can be proud of yourself for having done something. Yeah. And psychologically, that serves as a springboard, because when your body feels really good and cleaned out and lighter, you want to maintain that, right? And look, health is an iterative game. We're trying to do this stuff over the next, let's say we live for another 70, 80 years. That means that we need the rhythms of our life to constantly have these check-ins. So I love the idea of pulsing this throughout the year as these little times to help guide us back on track if we've drifted a little bit. ProLon fasting seems like a really good thing for people to check out. And we'll throw links to all your stuff in the description as well, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people after this that are like, send me the box. I want to check this out.
Yeah. And again, it's just 3 to 4 times a year. I mean, I'm one of the few proud CEOs to tell people don't do the product every day or every week. It's like the car racing. You do 2 pit stops, you do 3 pit stops. It's like our ancestors. I mean, we're reinvigorating the epigenetic adjustments to fasting. So in our grandfathers and mothers, there was one winter a year, they migrated. So they've gone through a couple of fasting there. Sometimes there's a draw in the summer. So it's really a 3 to 4 times unless you have, medical reasons or health reasons. But if it's for healthy aging and weight, 3 to 4 times a year. I do it once every quarter. The first box is like fasting. It's not going to be easy for many. But then the body builds that elasticity, which is so important, of moving from depending on carb to depending on ketones. Yeah. That elasticity is so important for healthy aging as well. And once you do the first box, then you get into the rhythm of doing it every quarter.
Well, I want to make sure people heard what that last thing you said is depending on, getting your body to become what I'll call metabolically flexible. There's many different kinds of fuel that we can burn. We can burn carbohydrates, we can burn fats, we can even make proteins, and use those in these energy producing pathways. I believe that the healthiest people on the planet are metabolically flexible. They have bodies that can tap into all different kinds of fuel sources. For today's day and age, most people are so inundated with high sugar that we're primarily burning sugar. And at this time, fasting is so unique because it depletes those carbohydrate stores, gets your body to tap into its natural fat burning and ketone production capacity. And you keep that. When you go back, and especially if you do the 12 to 14 hour everyday fast, you keep this metabolically flexible body that's producing some ketones. Then in taking some carbohydrates, insulin rises, shuttles everything into the cells, then it goes back down. And you have this body that has just so many options. for fuel. And I think that's really special and beautiful. So in closing, this was a powerful conversation. I mean, I got a ton out of this. I'm like really excited for ProLon. I'm going to give it a shot myself. And I'd love for you to have the floor one more time to share anything you like that would maybe be a little capstone on this conversation, and anything you have for our listeners today.
One thing I want to say again, as a father, but also as an MD PhD in science, I think fasting and healthy aging is core for us. We call it fasting as if it's a fancy thing. It is what our ancestors had as part of their diet. What we live today is a fad. They told us eat 6 times a day. They told us eat a lot of meat, eat this, eat fat. I mean, it's all every wave of diet that has come to us did not curb diabetes, did not curb obesity, did not curb Alzheimer's. Right. These are fads, and we're living a fad today. When we tell you fast, we're not telling you, oh, that's a new fad. We're telling you go back and reharmonize your body with how evolution and or human existence on
natural design. The system is designed for this.
Rematch your body with how it was designed. You rematch your body with nature day and night, and go back to what helped us live healthy. We used to die from acute infectious disease or wars or whatever, but it was not cancer. It was not Alzheimer's. The word Alzheimer's got discovered even late. We never had these. So I really recommend that people, on board on fasting. And I'm not saying you go fast 1 or 2 or 3 days all the time, or at least do your 12 to 14 hours. This is part of rematching your body with what it used to do. You want to lose some weight, go to the 16. I do it with food, with a fast bar, but 3 to 4 times a year. Go back and rejuvenate your cells. It's important for healthy aging. As a father and my wife as a mother, we always think about how can we stay healthy long for our kids and to support our parents. And I think this is a powerful way of doing that.
Well said. Perfect capstone on this. Dr. Joseph Antoun, thank you for coming on here, sharing your wisdom, inspiring so many of us. And I'm excited. Maybe we have you back on because I think this is a deep topic. And if you're open to it, we'll get you back on in a year and a half, hear about how your journey's going, all the new stuff, because the science is you're learning so much. So I'd love to have you back on. And thank you again for your time today.
We love you. Thank you very much. Thanks.